Welcome to Language Explorers, where we share the magic of language and emotions. I'm Stacey Marie, and in each episode, we explore the emotional and personal connections we have with the languages we speak, and how this changes the way we think and act. Curious? Keep listening. Today, I'm excited to share another inspiring conversation that can open your mind to new perspectives. No matter which language we're speaking, every conversation is a chance to learn, grow, share, and have some fun. So, let's explore words and expand our world together.
Today, I would like to introduce you to my guest, Isabelle. Isabelle, I am really happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Stacey. I'm happy too. It's a really nice experience for me.
I just want to tell our listeners that I was so incredibly intrigued by your language journey, Isabelle, that I asked Isabelle if I could pick her brain. Isabelle, do you know what it means for somebody to pick
It will
your
not
brain?
hurt, I hope.
No, and I've actually already done it. I asked you months ago if I could ask you questions. I wanted to understand how that happened, this whole language journey that you had. I don't want to go into the details quite yet, but I was so intrigued by your experience that I wanted to ask you questions. I was very curious. That's what it is to pick somebody's brain, is just to ask them questions and understand what went on in their mind. So I did that with you. And this is one of the reasons how the podcast started, is because I found it so interesting and incredible that I thought that maybe a lot of other people might want to hear your story or stories like yours too. That was the beginning of all of this. To begin in this first podcast with you, I would like to ask you about how this journey started, how you began your language learning journey in English. And before that, would you please tell our listeners how you and I met? So take another step back and tell everybody.
Okay, I try. I am Isabelle, and I met Stacey a few years ago, I think, because we were working together. I am a secretary, and I was curious because I was working with a lot of English teachers like Stacey, and I thought, I should have worked more my English when I was at school or in high school or whatever. And I started to think to restart my English learning with maybe one colleague. And I was very curious about the abilities of people like you, that can switch between two languages, French and English and French. And I thought it's like a magic spell. So I want to be able to do that.
Oh, that's a very sweet image of magic spells. It's like switch, c'est de la magie. Je parle en français. Switch. It's English. Oh, thank you for mentioning that. I wanted to thank you so much for being so brave to be speaking English with me today on this podcast, because it really has not been that long that you have been speaking English. And even for me, this is my first podcast, and I feel a little nervous. So I can imagine that it is, it's really big and incredible for you to dare to speak. That's great. Thank you so much for daring.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, seriously, it's awesome. Okay, so you were saying that when you were in this job at Montuter or Fitech, that you had this idea, oh, maybe I could start working on my English again. So that means that if it was again, you had already started to learn English. Would you maybe tell the speaker or the listeners, oh my goodness, please tell our listeners when you started English,
Yes.
right from the beginning.
From the beginning, I started learning English like everyone else, I think, in France, because in college, on the college, sorry, I'm speaking French again.
Oh, that's okay. And I
Uh,
forgot to mention, but you can switch to French whenever you get stuck or whenever you feel like it. That's a part of the game. So I understand
Okay.
that collège in French is what we call middle school.
Middle school, yes. Yes. J'étais en sixième, middle school, middle school. I started learning English at this time. So I learned some vocabulary like a list, and you had to remember a word in French equal a word in English. It didn't work at all with me. Because I'm not a great memorizer. I don't know how to say that. J'ai pas une très bonne mémoire. So I needed a context, and I was too young to understand my way to learn. I focused and I worked very hard to get my level, but it was at the end of my scholarship. It's good.
Yeah,
No, not scholarship.
I'm not sure, actually, to tell you the truth. I know that scholarship is a word. I would say at the end of my studies, like
Oh,
when you
yes.
finished
At
high
the,
school, is this what you mean?
yes, exactly. So, yes, I needed to obtain to get some good level for my studies and mon diplôme, du coup, mon baccalauréat, je sais pas.
Yeah, I would
Comment on dit?
say high school diploma.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. You can say
In September.
baccalaureate too, but we
Ah,
we
yeah?
naturally say
Okay.
high school diploma.
High school diploma, I needed to get good grades, and I worked very hard, but at the end, my grades were good, but I didn't manage to speak English with anyone. So I was just disappointed, because what's the goal to learn a language if you can't speak it? It's just unuseful.
Yeah, unuseful, useless. Yeah, what's the point? What's the point of learning a language? So I understand you acquired a lot of knowledge. You learned words, vocabulary, even though it wasn't your way to learn or your preferred way to learn, but you didn't really learn to speak or practice speaking.
Mm.
Okay. You mentioned that it wasn't really your way to learn, just translating directly from one word to another one. So, how could you identify your way to learn now?
Now I know how I can memorize or remember some new words. I like to listen to, like, for English podcasts, and I like to watch series on TV, or I don't know if I can speak about Netflix because it's a brand.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yes, they can be really great tools. Seriously. I don't really feel comfortable advertising either for companies
No.
like that, but they can be so useful for learning incredibly.
Yes, I really like it because I'm not a real fan of TV, but for my English learning, it's so useful. I need it. It's really helping. And I am using other ways, like simply reading some part of a notice. I just often use the context. I need context to learn new words, and I don't want to translate English and French and English because it's too, I don't know, for me, it's too much informations, I think. It's easier for me to just read in English, and if I don't understand, I read again. And if I don't understand, I just search on the web what does this word meaning, or I need to translate the words, but at the end, not at the beginning. I just start with English.
Okay, so I hear that, yeah, when you were in school, the words were not in necessarily in context, they were in lists. And so later on, you realized if the words were actually in the context of some sort of an episode or in your daily life, like reading the instruction manual for something, or maybe reading a recipe. I think you've mentioned looking at recipes before.
Yeah.
So here it's, I actually need to find the definition of that word in the context or the translation so I can understand it in my daily life. Okay, that answers the question for learning, for acquiring knowledge, for your listening comprehension. Maybe later on, we can go a little bit more into how you overcame that obstacle of having this knowledge and actually being able to speak it. Because here, when you're listening and you're reading, you're still not actually speaking. But maybe we'll come back to that one in a later episode. Before that, I would like to ask you if you can think of a favorite learning experience that you've had, either as a child or as an adult.
I'm thinking about Easy Story in English. You can hear this podcast on Spotify or Deezer or whatever. And on the website, you can hear, listen to, and read at the same time. I love this way to learn because I'm feeling that I'm not really working. I'm just enjoying this. It's a podcast of stories, and I love reading and listening to stories. So, like fairy tales, or it could be short stories or long stories. This podcaster is so creative. So, I really enjoy to listen to this podcast, and I love this kind of learning because I'm playing like it's like a game, but I'm learning at the same time. So it's a really good recreative work in a way.
Creative work. Oh, that sounds like an oxymoron. In French, you can call it oxymore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny, but I love
Exactly.
it. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, since we've already advertised for Netflix and Spotify and everybody else, maybe you would like to share who it is that's been doing this amazing podcast that you enjoy so much. Would you like to share?
It's Ariel Goodbody. Yes, his name is Ariel Goodbody. And always said, "Hi, El Goodbody, your host for the show. Listen and enjoy." I love it.
Awesome. Okay, great. So, yes, I ask these questions because I'm always very curious when I hear people really enjoying their learning experiences or very successful. They're very good at communicating in English. And that's been my question over all these years. When I hear people speaking, how did you learn? And how is it that you connect with it? Like, and yeah, I think that this type of podcast that Ariel is putting out is really contributing to helping you and lots of other people to enjoy the learning experience, like you said, and it doesn't feel like you're studying or working or anything. So that's great. Okay, one more question, or maybe two, before we wrap up. Can you share with our listeners what...
Or maybe two.
Sorry. It's difficult to keep things short for me, and maybe you understand. Anyways, Isabelle, I was wondering what your biggest difficulties have been in English.
My bigger difficulties. I think it was at the beginning, but it's not the case anymore. At the beginning, it took me a very long time to understand what people say. It's simple, but it was a huge effort for me. I needed to go back and go back. It was really discouraging because I needed to read at the same time I was listening, and maybe I was listening to 30 seconds, and it was too much. I maybe I understood just a single word. It was just, oh, I will never do that. Especially for the American accent. It was terrible for me. And now I'm very comfortable with all accents because I used to.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I understand that frustration. And if I think back to my learning experience in French, I remember that frustration too.
Hi everyone. I'm just popping in with a quick note to help you to follow along easier. For the next few minutes, you're going to hear me switch to speaking French to share a bit more personally about my own stormy, tumultuous journey learning French. But don't worry, if you don't understand French, you can follow along with the English subtitles, and we'll be back in English shortly after. Now, let's get back to our conversation with Isabelle in French for a bit.
Ok, j'avais dit qu'on allait switcher en français à un moment donné, donc je vais parler en français. Je suis désolée si j'ai surpris du monde comme ça à switcher aussi rapidement, mais c'était très spontané. J'ai décidé de parler français parce que j'avais envie de raconter ce que ça m'avait fait d'apprendre le français. Moi, oui, quand je ne comprenais rien ou quasiment rien, ou un mot où j'essayais de décrypter ce qui était sur les visages des personnes et je ne savais pas si ça reflétait vraiment ce qu'ils disaient. C'était inquiétant, perturbant et c'était, oui, c'était long, c'était stressant, je dirais. Et heureusement, on a réussi à surmonter ces passages-là, toi et moi et bien d'autres personnes qui nous écoutent. Et je dirais que la manière de dépasser ces blocages, ces difficultés, peuvent être différentes pour toutes les personnes. Est-ce que toi, en anglais ou en français, comme tu le souhaites, tu voudrais partager quelque chose qui t'a aidé avec cette difficulté?
Oui, je veux bien le partager en français parce que c'est ma langue maternelle, je suis beaucoup plus à l'aise. En fait, il m'a beaucoup aidé. Je l'ai appris malheureusement pour moi, mais heureusement pour ceux qui nous écoutent. Je l'ai appris sur le tard, vraiment, peut-être 2, 3 ans plus tard. En fait, j'avais beaucoup de difficultés à écouter. Par exemple, en fait, je lisais comment dire, le sous-titre en fait en anglais d'un épisode de série pour apprendre. Mais en fait, j'étais tout en train d'appuyer sur le petit bouton, en arrière, 5 secondes, 10 secondes, 15 secondes en arrière. C'était assez décourageant. Et en fait, je m'accrochais aux sous-titres. Bon, à l'époque, j'avais même besoin de sous-titres en français en réalité parce que j'arrivais vraiment à rien comprendre du tout. Donc c'était vraiment très difficile. Et en fait, au bout d'un moment, donc forcément avec l'habitude, je suis passée aux sous-titres anglais et j'avais besoin de revenir très très souvent en arrière, et de faire pause. Très souvent pause pour avoir quelquefois le temps de lire toute la phrase parce que ça va très vite avec l'action, etc. Et en fait, maintenant, j'ai découvert un truc qui est génial. C'est que ce soit sur Spotify, ou je sais pas quel autre système d'écoute. Ensuite, il y a YouTube, Netflix ou peu importe le support. Généralement, ça existe un peu partout maintenant. Il y a ce petit fois 0,5 ou fois 0 fois 1 en fait, et généralement on écoute d'office, c'est en fois 1, c'est-à-dire la vitesse est normale. Et si on veut simplement, ralentir un petit peu quand la personne est en train de parler, ce qui est très utile quand c'est pas notre langue, et ben, il suffit de simplement de faire fois 0,8 ou fois 0,9 ou, fois 0,6 en fonction de son niveau et c'est vraiment pratique.
Oui, oui. Ah bah merci Isabelle, c'est génial que tu aies partagé cette petite astuce-là. Parce que ce podcast-là, justement, nous parlons de manière très naturelle. Et
Mmh.
donc, ça peut être beaucoup trop vite, beaucoup trop vite pour beaucoup de personnes. Et ça peut aider de ralentir la vitesse de lecture pour que ça soit plus
Tout à fait.
simple. Oui, c'était très bien, c'est très bien de préciser ça. Une bonne idée. Et comme tu disais, tu as besoin de mettre sur pause, de réécouter. Eh bien, ici, mon intention avec ces épisodes, c'était de les garder assez courts pour que les personnes puissent justement ne pas trop se fatiguer en écoutant, qu'ils puissent avoir l'occasion de revenir, de réécouter si besoin. Donc, c'est mon challenge de les garder courts. C'est ainsi. J'essaierai la prochaine fois de garder un peu plus court. Donc, merci beaucoup Isabelle et je te dis à la prochaine épisode.
And now, I'm switching back to English once more before we go. I would like to take a moment to reflect after hearing about Isabelle's experiences and insights. I find it inspiring to hear how Isabelle has found methods that resonate with her and overcome challenges, like feeling comfortable with different accents and using the power of context to learn words. To everyone listening, I encourage you to take a moment to think about your own language journey. What methods have really helped you to learn and feel more at ease, even if they're maybe outside of the traditional approach? And are there any challenges you're still facing, like speaking spontaneously or understanding certain accents? Do you feel that language learning is about perfection, or is it more about finding ways to make it enjoyable and meaningful for you, like Isabelle has? I'd like to thank you all for listening, and I am happy to continue the conversation with you in the comments and with Isabelle in future episodes. Thank you for joining us on Language Explorers. I hope today's conversation has inspired you to think about language in new ways. Remember, every word we speak, no matter the language, can be a step toward greater connection, understanding, and inclusion. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and join us next time for more stories that reveal the beauty and power of language. Until then, keep exploring.